Thanks again. I appreciate this time being with you here. I intend to talk to you about place and placemaking, and I've jotted some notes from the sessions I attended earlier this morning, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of translation from what we're doing in Michigan that might perhaps help you here in Delaware. You have a great program that is starting underway called Complete Communities. I've had a chance to meet with Ralph and the University of Delaware folks and chat with them and see your website online as well. So here's what I want to do today, kind of quickly, because I have a number of images I want to show you. I'm going to walk you through understanding what your sense of place is. Then move to talking about place types in a region. And then, as I heard Ed McMahon talk about this morning, this growing demand for what here in Michigan we're calling place. After we talk about that, the components of the initiative in Michigan, this idea of a curriculum of place and placemaking. And then I took an opportunity over the past week or so to think about the lessons we've learned in Michigan that might be of assistance to you all here in Delaware. And maybe some of those impacts, I've listed them there, summarized, and they might be of help to you. And then if there's a little bit of time left for questions, I have a video off of Michigan's MIplace website. If I get the technical correct, I'm not a techie, I'll make the attempt, but I'll run that video, and then of course we'll take your questions or comments, okay? All right, so what's behind the Michigan Initiative? It's pretty simple. It's to shift the paradigm. The paradigm towards place-based livability. I heard in the previous presentation just good comments, but frankly, similar things that I've heard in Michigan and some other states that I've been in recently as well, which is we have to change the systems. The development system has to change, but in order for that to happen, the finance system has to change. And in order for both of those to happen, the regulatory system needs to change. Or maybe they all need to change simultaneously, okay? But they need to change. And how do you get that change to occur? When you have different groups, different people at different stages. And more than that, are those systems in tune with the market? I'm going to submit to you that they are not. Okay? Come back to that in a few minutes. When the governor asked me and a committee of interagency folks to get the MIplace initiative started about a year and a half ago, he said, this cannot be another government program. And you know what? I agreed with him. We agreed with him. We said, nope, if it's another government program, we're dead in the water right out of the gate. Okay? So you're looking at the first of our internal rules here. Second, we are not, with our program, dictating to those interests, to those systems. In fact, by using a market and data-driven approach, almost a real estate development approach, land, market, product, the opportunities arise and the change should be, in my opinion, in our opinion, evident if one checks their personal preference at the door and looks at the data objectively. Okay? And finally, placemaking is a buzzword. I'm going to be direct with you on it. But if we can build on it, maybe co-opt that word, to build on the trend that's building that you're hearing about, that we're working on, then if we can advance practice and public policy, better off for us, okay? So, placemaking. What is it? First thing you need to do is separate the phrases, because placemaking has the objective of achieving place. And we have to understand what place is first as an outcome before we move to placemaking. That sounds rational, right? How many communities, how many developers, how many folks are blazing into complete place-based activities without really understanding what it is? That's what I want to talk to you and share with you in the next few minutes. How do people understand place? All of you understand it. It's intuitive into your mind. But what does it really mean? How do you sense when you're in a good place and you sense when you're not? Right? You do. I know you do. What are the elements behind that? It's really two leading to your emotional reaction. It's form, physical form, combined with activity, social, economic, or socioeconomic, which when it's good form, and when it's good form, it naturally sustains good activity, and your personal or community or society's response to those good factors is positive. And that's your intuitive sense of place working for you. Okay? And the relationship is exactly that. Form drives or influences activity. And to the extent it's good and sustainable, your real emotional reaction is good. Okay? Your Complete Communities program has 5 elements to it, as I understand it, and I've talked to the staff. Complete streets, efficient land use, healthy and livable, inclusive and active, and sustainable. And so what you're looking at in this relationship are the 5 elements of your program just categorized into form and activity. I like to give this slide to folks. This is what I call the thespian version of your sense of place. Okay? All right? Actually, that's a concert happening down there, but it could well be a theater production, right? Where the stage, the theater, the concert hall is the form. The play or the concert is the activity that occurs within that framework of the form. I want you to really think about that. Think about it. And when the form is good and the activity is good, you like that concert or that play. Once again, your emotional response is leading you to prefer that. Okay? Why am I hammering so hard on this? Is because if we came out of the gate with the Michigan program by saying we have to change our land use paradigm and we have to focus on density and we have to do this or have to do that, already the walls are coming up with folks who are vested in the psychology of the current time. So by getting into people's thinking emotionally about what is good place, that is the start of our approach to try to get people to rethink the entire paradigm. Okay? One other element about this side, there's got to be 800 seats in that theater, okay? Which means that there are 800 different perspectives on what that form and what that activity is, which is important and necessary. Just like you all in this lunch are hearing me with your own perspective, and that's good and necessary. But we are social beings, and our preferences aggregate into directions, into action. And market analysis is a critical component of understanding where the aggregations of demand or interest are going. And I'm going to talk about more of that in a few minutes as it relates to place and placemaking. Let's talk about form. Any of you all been to Mackinac Island before? Okay. Well, those of you who haven't, I have a little task for you. Take your 2 hands. Show me your 2 hands. Okay? Take your right hand, put it in front of you like this. Put your left hand like this. You're looking at Michigan. Right? So right between your hands is the Straits of Mackinac, and in the Straits of Mackinac is this little island called Mackinac Island. Okay? And what's unique about Mackinac Island is that there's a state trunk line highway that surrounds the island, goes to the little downtown. But do you see any cars? No. Cars are not allowed on Mackinac Island. The way you get around Mackinac Island is horse and buggy. Or you hoof it yourself. You walk. Okay? Now, it's not a big island. Don't worry. Okay? You're not going to die tooling around 3 miles of circumference around the island. But it is an excellent example, and you'll see a number of slides following in which I'm want to show you form and how it relates to people. Okay? Form. This is downtown Detroit, by the way. The arrangement of mass either buildings or objects, and space. Please think about that now. Not just an object, the table or chairs in here, but the collection of tables and chairs in this room is the collective form of what's going on. Okay? Good form aligns with a regional place location. Every place type within a region has a form. I'll show that to you in a few slides as well. Back to Mackinac. A mix of blocks, streets, and buildings. It was a foggy day when I took these pictures, okay? But you still see the form, and you see the mix, right? You see the mix of building types, you see the mix of activity. It's a mix. Where the private meets the public defines the frame of place. If you are municipal practitioners or developers, maybe all of you understand where the line is between public and private here, right? Where's that line? It's at the outside edge of the sidewalk, at least where I come from, okay? And so that is the border, between the public space, in this case the right-of-way, and the private space. And in any form arrangement, anywhere you go, that boundary defines a frame for which activity occurs, intersecting across that boundary all the time. Good form has natural features. Even in the core downtowns of our regions, there is still nature in appropriate design context, okay? At an appropriate scale. This is natural. In rural place, human and natural activity combine in the right mix to create rural form. That, I'm sure you'll agree, is the right mix for rural form. Oh, and by the way, nature is a place with form too. I'm sure you knew that. What's the form? The absence of human form. It is natural form. Okay? Within that framework of form, activity occurs. I want you to think about this again. I'm asking you to think about a lot. I want you to think about these things to yourself and your person, which is in any location where there is good activity, what is the framework of form that surrounds it? What type of form is it? Okay? It could be social activity, a party, a social event, a ball game, whatever it might be. Almost always including kids. It could be economic activity, your farmers markets, your other outdoor exercise activities. Cars and people interchange in good form. Or it could be socioeconomic activity, like this scene, where it's a farmer's market, but the family is engaged in a family activity, both economic and social. In Michigan, we have a very deep arts activity content. You're looking at downtown Ann Arbor and downtown East Lansing. Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is, East Lansing, where Michigan State University is located. Very deep, very extensive. Natural activity, as I said, is defined by the absence of a lot of human activity. You go to nature to benefit psychologically from the benefit of being in nature. And where there is human activity, it does not dominate, it is only subtle. My message here is that form directly influences and naturally sustains activity when it is good. And that addresses at least two, if not most, of your complete community principles. And note that I didn't use the word land use. Now, I'm a planner, okay? My intention is not to be critical of planners, but when we focus on land use, we disconnect ourselves psychologically from what is the built environment. That is form. Either programmed or spontaneous, DIY, do-it-yourself. That's downtown Detroit, folks. All right? That park, Campus Martius, 6 years ago, was a plaza of which had a parking deck underneath it. And the whole thing was, 10 years ago, I apologize. The whole thing was removed, and Campus Martius, the originally platted Central Park in Detroit, when it came back, that's spontaneous every day in downtown Detroit. Well, maybe not on days like today, okay, all right? But on nice sunny days, yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So your sense of place is emotionally driven by these combinations, okay? Now, I've hammered away hard on this because, again, it sets the basis for now moving to the next area here. I'm sorry, one more slide. This people-place connection, good form, sustains natural activity, meaning it doesn't require significant expenses or sums of capital or people activity to sustain it. It happens. It just happens. And it yields positive emotion, making your connection. Now, in a region, okay, you have different place types, right? It's actually a continuum, but in reality, for understanding purposes, many practitioners and many folks divide it into 6 different place types. How many of you heard the word transect before? Please, hi, I'm a short guy. I can't see your hand. Okay, there we go. I'm pleasantly surprised. When I ask that question to audiences, often I don't get too much of a response. So we have chosen to use the phrase place types, again, which is bringing it for more general understanding to people. Those of you who raised your hand probably have seen this image before or something that's like it. Okay? This is the natural to urban transect. It came into popular distribution about 10 years ago. I was there at the CNU when it was discussed. 2 things struck me. One is that a lot of people had an aha moment when they saw this. And second, it recalls to my mind my second year in graduate planning school learning about place types or the transect, because this has been in the literature for probably about 100 years or so. All right, but being brought into more common practice now and dynamic practice, or representation I should say, is very helpful. I'm sorry, and so now let's look at what those place types are. And now you're going to get a sense of what I was doing yesterday with my fiance, okay? Because you're going to see some place types for Michigan. And as you see the place types of Michigan, I'm not sure if Pure Michigan, the state of Michigan, advertises here in Delaware. We're more regionally focused in Midwest, where we try to draw everybody out of Ohio to come spend money in Michigan, okay, right? Or Wisconsin. But these images that you're seeing here are right of our Pure Michigan campaigns, trying, again, once again, to get people to understand that place is connected to tourism and economic prosperity. Okay, so natural place in Michigan. Here's what it looks like. All right. Now, you remember I showed you that slide which shows social, economic, and psychological activity. What you're looking at in that little bar chart is what the literature, the summary literature shows as relative intensity of people and activity and emotion based upon these place types. So it makes sense that in a natural place, there is not a whole lot of activity or economic activity or social activity, but there's a tremendous amount of psychological response, positive psychological response. Why? Because it's natural. There ain't a lot of human activity in nature. That's where the critters live. And wouldn't you know, you all have it too. We were the only ones on the beach yesterday in this location. Enjoyed it for quite a while. And your woodlands, I was surprised. I didn't have any idea I just didn't think of that Delaware. I thought Delaware was farms, fields, and the beach. And now I can see you have good forest land as well. All good natural form. Rural. Now, you're a rural state. I come from an experience of spending 2 years working in Vermont, which was another rural state. So I know a little bit about what rural is. And what I can tell you, and I think makes sense to you, although I might say it differently, is that rural is urban. What do I mean by that? Rural is not small town. Your small towns are actually collections of urban neighborhoods, 1, 2, or 4, or a small number of urban neighborhoods surrounded by rural space. When in placemaking, rural really refers to the growing land, where the crops are grown, where the fruit is grown to sustain us as humans, okay? And you got it too, right? And we just happened to catch you guys at the right time, okay? All right? A lot of soybeans growing here, huh? Okay. Suburban. This place between between rural and city or city neighborhood. It has a form to it. I'll come back to the form and the markets in a few minutes. Okay? Then comes traditional neighborhood. I think this is where most of your, based on my observation, most of your building mass is within traditional city-tile neighborhoods. Okay? All right? I had the pleasure of staying here in town in Dover for the past couple days. The capital city of Dover is absolutely beautiful. Or as my fiancé likes to say, c'est très bien. Okay? Activity, things going on. Downtown. Downtown is a place type itself, right? And you know that. If you're running a Main Street program in your community, you're running a place-based program right now, okay? It's where the mix happens, okay? And Dover has a wonderful downtown. And so does Milford, too, by the way. I drove through Milford yesterday on my way back from the beach. So, and I'm sure many communities have nice downtowns, too. Don't take offense to that. Delaware is a beautiful state, as I said. You still have the form across the state. Many states don't. So treasure that, okay? And then, now, every metropolitan region has a downtown to itself. In Michigan, it would be Detroit as the downtown for the Detroit metro region. Or it would be Lansing for Lansing, or Grand Rapids, okay? And so for you, my understanding, and please correct me, is that Wilmington probably comes closest to being your core downtown for that regional area. Although I know Wilmington is part of the Philadelphia metro area, I believe. Is that correct? Okay, so, all right. But you know what? Downtown Wilmington is the gathering place, isn't it? And think about, look at that activity, and look at the form that surrounds that activity. Look at it, okay? It naturally sustains. So now, here it is again, your place types. You have them in Delaware. The question is, what is the correct form of those place types, and what activity occurs when you have good form? And how do you plan and execute the maintenance or future development of good form? Well, in Michigan, one of the ways we started to do this is to show local versions of this transect or form, and what you're looking at here is the transect of Detroit. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that it runs from natural to urban, okay? But do you see municipal boundaries in that? Nope. All right? And the reason we chose to do that is so people can get out of the paradigm of thinking, I'm this community or I'm that community, and understand that we live in a region of which form should be correct by place location. Okay? So that's place. Now, what's placemaking? It's pretty simple, actually, yet it's complex. They are the actions used to achieve the outcome. So when the gentleman, I think his name was Greg, I had a chance to meet with him, who represented Dover, City of Dover this morning. I heard him talk. He was talking to you about placemaking, those actions that were being engaged, okay, and leading to an outcome. In the background, the slides, the maps he was showing, was the intended outcome of form, good form intended to drive good activity. It could be a singular act or a multiple part process. Programmed or spontaneous, and it could range. Now this LQC is an acronym. Joe Molinaro, the State Association of Realtors, is working with us to develop a lighter, quicker, cheaper. That's what that means. Trying to get some less expensive, kind of spontaneous placemaking activities going in our state. Or it could be direct investment, like what you saw in the Dover example from this morning. But what's important is that placemaking, the actions, are directly tied to and lead to an outcome. What's that outcome? Activity. And here's where I'm going to start to dive into what the market trends are saying. Creating livable neighborhoods or maintaining them and social downtowns is attractive to talented people. And attracting talented people nowadays is the number one generator and enhancer of economic prosperity, and I would submit social and ecological too. Okay? What's that talent looking for? All of the surveys, national surveys, are describing this, that talent is aggregating in certain locations where there is dynamic living environments with both activity, as I mentioned earlier, and activities that comprise the activity. It could be outdoor activity, it could be local food, farmers markets, sports, water. You can see those examples. But they all come together in a mix. That's what's important. Diverse lifestyle with lots of choices. Choices in transportation. You heard this morning from Ed McMahon about the decrease in driver's licenses in DC, and you know what? That is a trend that's building and growing nationwide. All right? A choice in housing type and range of prices and density. And here is what I consider to be the most important element, which is this word proximity. I want you to, again, put that in the back of your mind and think about it. Proximity. We are social beings. We thrive economically, socially, ecologically when we are proximate to each other. Or if we're thinking economically, in specifics, it is this proximity of capital and resources which work together to drive entrepreneurial activity, risk-taking, innovation. It happens only with proximity. Now, research of 10 years ago or so thought that with the rise of the internet, that people could play what would be called lone eagle scenario, which is they could be in their home working on their computer and connecting to the rest of the world. And that happens. Absolutely. Internet market penetration is huge. But something else has also happened too. And the research studies are showing that too. It's actually when people have more connectivity, more freedom of connectivity, they're choosing to come together. Not just socially, not just electronically, but now physically. Okay? The research and data shows that there is increasing demand for, think of those place types I showed you. City neighborhood, downtown, regional core by 3 of the 4 U.S. generations. Now, quick primer here. What are the generations? We have effectively 4 generations in our society. We have the greatest generation, the generation which won the wars. We have the boomer generation, which is now at and moving into retirement. We have the X generation, which came after the boomers. And then finally, and you've probably heard these names as well, the millennials. Okay? Now, last year, the millennial generation surpassed the boomer generation in size. I don't know if you knew that or not, but that's in fact the case. The largest generation in America today is the millennial generation. The boomers are just right behind. But what you're sensing, which I want you to understand, is that there's just these market shifts, these demographic shifts have always been going, and they're still going, okay? And now, as the boomers downsize and move into retirement, and the X generation moves into higher executive level positions in the corporate and employment, then the millennial generations are taking their role and their place in society. And that has profound trends. ULI, NAR, Charles Lesser, I can't think of a major national scale study which has been done in the past 2 years which has not shown these accelerating trends. More than 80% of the millennials want to live in city or downtown or core places. Okay? Remember I told you, you kind of got to check, maybe I didn't say this, it's important for you to check your personal preference here. Okay? right? Because we have the tendency as humans to say, okay, I like it because I like it. Or maybe I don't like it because I don't personally like that. When you're dealing with market analysis and demographic trends, it's important to check that at the door before you start looking at this data. Okay? So understand that you may not like this, or you might, but 80% plus of the millennial generation, if the product is available, will choose it. That's not me talking, that's the studies talking. I'm just giving you the numbers. Okay? Why is that the case? Well, one major factor is that statement at the bottom, which is that by 2025, excuse me, 72% of the households in the U.S. will be without children. Now, that hasn't been picked up too much. You perhaps have sensed it, but we are changing as a society. We're going to single and two-person households. Family households, which has been the mainstay since 1950, are moving into a smaller minority position in terms of population. And so those trends, this is giving you a sense of seeing what the national data is, all right, and it's happening at any geographic level. The studies in Michigan have shown us that we are 30% overbuilt on detached single-family housing. 30. I don't know what it would show for Delaware, but you might want to know that, okay? Because it really feeds into how you look at your community in terms of completeness. We did some analysis early on, and we chose a couple of our Midwestern counterparts. Anybody recognize the map to the left? Chicago, that's right. The place where every Michigan millennial wants to go, Chicago. Okay? All right, and right behind Chicago, anybody recognize the map on the right? Minneapolis. Did it say, oh, okay, it says it on the maps. Okay, you guys are funny. All right, you can see them on this screen, and so when I give these presentations, the screen's so small, I have to describe where it is. But yes, you're looking at Minneapolis and the metro regions of Minneapolis and Chicago. And let me explain what the dots are, okay? The red dots, or red areas, they're really dots, are aggregations of 200 households where the householder is of the millennial generation and 5 years into the X generation. Once again, millennial and 5 years into the X generation, the householder is that age. They could be an owner, they could be a renter, but they are a household, and that household is headed by somebody in that age range. The blue is everybody else. Now look at Chicago. I think it's pretty apparent. You can see where the talent is aggregating in Chicago, can't you? Right? It's aggregating. It's talent aggregation, but folks, it's entrepreneurship aggregation. It's place-based economic development, and it's the future of Chicago. And where are the place types? City, downtown, core. Being direct. Okay? That's where it's aggregating. And in Minneapolis, same thing. A little less dense than Chicago, but it's still there. I forgot to tell you, this is 2008 data. I have the 2011 data. I haven't put it to the maps on the internet yet, but it's more red. Okay? Now, what we did was compare to our Michigan cities. On the left is Minneapolis, and on the right is Grand Rapids. You know, if you remember, you hold your hand, Grand Rapids is over here, right? On the left side of your hand. It's our second largest city in Michigan, and there's some holes in the Grand Rapids, aren't there? And so what that is telling us is that talent is aggregating in the downtown, but not to the extent that it is aggregating in Minneapolis, right? Why? Because Grand Rapids does not have the place types which are attractive to the millennial generation, the future, right? And then we compared Chicago to Detroit. And yes, while I talk to you about downtown Detroit, you can see a little blip there, which is downtown and midtown Detroit. By the way, downtown and midtown Detroit, here's another statistic for you. Midsummer this year, the vacancy rate for residential in downtown and midtown Detroit was under 4%. Does that surprise you? I hope it does. It surprised us when we got that information. So, but the rest of many places in Detroit are what the media says. okay? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. We have our work cut out for us. But not just repopulation. We're not gonna repopulate Detroit completely like it was. We're not gonna repopulate Youngstown or Akron or a number of the other Midwest industrial cities. It's gonna be a place-based, it's gonna be a right-sizing focus in those communities. And that's a positive benefit that you have here in Delaware, because you have not seen the disinvestment or the abandonment like has happened in some of the cities in the Midwest. And so you've got a better base to build on if you look at place-based approaches than we have had in Michigan. At one time, and perhaps to some of you, this still hits it in terms of good form, okay? Remember, to a growing percentage of the population, that is good form, which leads to good activity. Now, let me talk a little bit about MIplace, okay? How are we in Michigan trying to get at achieving those outcomes that I've mentioned to you? Well, first of all, we set the stage, which is we're going to restore prosperity, and we are restoring prosperity through place-based placemaking, place-based economic development, right? Now, I'm here talking to you today, but I'm not alone, okay? Because my boss wants it to happen. He's the governor, Rick Snyder, okay? And right out of the gate after being reelected, that sentence you saw there was spoken. And three of his four executive messages to the legislature and the people of Michigan have said place and economic development are intertwined, and we have to start to look at it that way and act that way and plan that way. So this image on the right, which represents the Sense of Place Council, was a group that had organized about 8 years ago and had been leading and facilitating and building this effort for place-based economic development. And I know it's alphabet soup to you, okay? Don't worry about the acronyms here, but what you're looking at is all but about 3 of the statewide trade organizations. All but 3. And one of the 3 just joined, okay? All right, so it wasn't just out of the blue. There was a significant ramp up in involvement, okay? So much so that when Governor Snyder was elected in 2010, one of his first executive orders was to bring the development agencies in the state together in a partnership. ICC stands for Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee. And once again, more alphabet soup, but perhaps these might be a little more recognizable to you, like you see MDOT, which is Department of Transportation, and you see the Economic Development Corporation, EDC, and my organization, MISHDA, the Housing Development Authority, and the DEQ, Environmental Quality, and MDARD, the Department of Ag and Rural Development, and the DNR. So we're all working together as a team, literally as a team, in trying to affect place-based strategies. It's a top-down, yet bottom-up structure that we're operating. The state leads with a structure, a flexible structure, similar to what I've heard today, okay, that encourages local and regional participation. However, we have a full intent to target our incentives to those place locations, number one, that have good regional and local planning efforts, which are place-based and highlight good form by place location, and where there will be job-producing and talent attraction outcomes, based on the research knowledge we have that the best investment of public funds is to those projects and in those neighborhoods, not just because it's the best social investment, and not just because it's the best ecological investment, because we save the farms, fields, forests, and frogs, but it's because it's now, and the research shows, the best economic and fiscal investment, both for the public and, frankly, for the private development community. The components focus on starting with the research, the curriculum, I'll come back to that in a minute, but training based upon a common curriculum base, moving into practice, program, as I mentioned, incentive targeting to place locations throughout the state, then moving it into policy, looking to institutionalize this so that it survives this administration, becomes the primary component of our policy. Because as I heard this morning in one of the questions, how are we going to pay for it? Well, I'll tell you what, that's part of the problem, which is, at least in my state, we built out at too low of a density, and now we're in a Ponzi scheme, meaning that new development at such low density can't pay for the replacement cost, let alone the maintenance cost. I see heads shaking. You understand that scenario. Maybe not here, but you understand that scenario. And so my answer to that question this morning was, need to build more building mass. More building mass on a per land or other acre unit basis, because that's where your tax revenue is going to come. And then finally, one of the things, because Governor Snyder came out of the private sector world, he says, you know what, you got to measure it, give us results. So we're doing that too. Okay. This idea of a curriculum. I want you to think about this too. I've asked you to think about a lot of things today. Okay, all right. Go back in time in your mind to the environmental movement of the 60s. And now add to that the historic preservation movement of the 70s. And the downtown movement of the 80s. And the new urbanist movement of the 90s. And the right-sizing movement of the 2000s. And the local food movement that's occurring. I think it's occurring here as well. Okay. What those movements did in our society was bring critical information, critical knowledge, critical development and research to fore, which changed practice, changed knowledge, changed society. But when you talk about complete communities, or you talk about placemaking, one of the missing pieces here is that those movements created infrastructures and practitioners and activities which were all good and valuable, but how interconnected are they? I would submit not very interconnected, except through indirect reference. And so the idea of a curriculum is really nothing new. It's more than bringing all that knowledge and practice together. Just like we have in most of our colleges and universities, or generally known, a curriculum of biology, or a curriculum of accounting, or a curriculum of computer science. There should be a curriculum of place and placemaking, or in your case, it would be complete communities. Okay? And so I've talked to the staff at the University of Delaware, both prior to and coming in today. I am quite interested in offering the curriculum that we have been putting together to date for two reasons. One is if it's a benefit to you all in running your program, but secondly, I'm interested to have you all contribute what you know about place-based economic development. So that we can benefit in Michigan as well. By the way, this curriculum sounds academic, and it's structured deliberately so. 6 modules, I'm not going to show them to you. Okay, there's 6 different modules, and at each module they're at basic level, at intermediate level, advanced level, and teacher level. The idea is that whether you're a practitioner, or whether you're a elected, or an appointed, or a citizen, okay, that you can plug in and add to your knowledge and learning and practice and policy development at whatever special level that you choose or you are at. It's the base. In Michigan, through MIplace, we are using it to teach and train. We have a full slate of training and education going next year. We'll use it as the base, as I mentioned, to our targeting programs, okay? And we're going to use it as the base to develop our place-based economic development policy. So, I'm going to wrap this portion of the presentation with some lessons, okay? Perhaps you've seen this, maybe not. I'll leave it for you. At your seating, it's tough to see probably the details, and I'm not intending for you to see all the details here. But what you're trying to do with Complete Communities is actually move from the left side of this screen over towards the right side of the screen, where you want to go from auto-focused development to people-focused development. Okay? All right. See some head shaking. It's starting to make sense. All right. Now, you'll never see those words at the bottom. It's not intended. I wanted you to see the image. But these principles here for edges, sidewalks, parking, buildings, and character, they could have taken it right out of the program that you've started to build already. Very similar, because you already made these findings. You're making these findings. Moving towards making these recommendations, these actions for those types of public infrastructure and mass and form arrangement areas. So, rising demand for more and different urban housing types means more urban commercial office and business demand. And it also means in the future there will be less new suburban and rural residential demand and its resulting development. Centers, city centers, downtown centers, village centers, nodes, and key regional corridors will become the primary locations for your growth and redevelopment. Your form must be right and match place location on the transect. And what do I mean by that? Within a region, you are who you are. If you are the core, or a downtown, or a neighborhood, or suburban, or rural and natural, that is your place type. The history is replete with mistakes from communities or developers that have tried to build the wrong place type in regional location. Right? Public spaces and places and activities are shaped by your private space. Form is key here. Remember, I've said that about 40 times. Here's 41. Form is key. Complete streets and context-sensitive design principles will influence your street decisions. They already are. I've talked to Ralph. We've got a Complete Streets program. I'm on the Complete Streets Council for Michigan. We are already incorporating them. Our legislature adopted a law which which required a policy, and now our policy is going into, which we adopted, for every MDOT project statewide will have to conform to Complete Street guidelines. But the guidelines are different based upon regional place location, which is a hallmark of context-sensitive design. If you are a transportation planner or know about CSD, you know that in many DOT operations, context solutions is the way that they've been going for a while. So Complete Streets fits like hand in glove if in a CS context-sensitive design framework. And in the metro areas, transit-oriented design, TOD, it's just to attract talent, it's got to happen. Again, close to you have some really, really good examples in Philly and DC. To make all this happen, extensive education is critical. So I applaud you for what you're doing here today and hope that you continue it. I haven't talked much, and I haven't heard much about form-based regulations. But I'm going to submit to you, I'm personally convinced that that is the way to go, but not that a form-based code is the solution. A code is the perfunctory last step of a community working with their developers in charrette process to achieve the outcomes that come through charrette planning of the city, of the neighborhood, of the project, and that should occur in master planning. And so I don't use the term form-based coding too much. I like to use the phrase form planning. And that's what you've heard a lot in this presentation today, which is planning by form. And if the communities, if the citizens, if the developers, if the property owners understand what that means and agree to it in charrette process, then frankly, the regulatory system can not only change away from zoning, but can go to a framework where, because the form is known and has been planned, that development can be done, administrative review permitted by right. I see some eyes raising on what I just said. I can talk to you more about that later, but the idea here is that in a charrette process, if the development community and the municipal community, for that phrase, and the citizens come together and come to agreement in the context of development planning for a corridor or for a site or a location, it does provide the opportunity for a municipality to engage a process where, because your form, the envelope of your form is potentially known, that you can move the regulatory process to a permit by right administrative review process. And that is what's happening in many communities in the Midwest where this has come together. But what's key is charrette, which some of you may not know that term. Really, it's community-based work group process where the participants are the decision makers, facilitated by folks to arrive at issues of common solution. Above it all, in summary, it's all about livability, right? And in Michigan, that is key to why we're doing this. We want to have livable neighborhoods, and following the market trends and engaging in education, training, practice, and policy, we will get to those ends, okay? Quick note here, you'll note that's the website. If you learn nothing else from me today, you can write that down, MIplace.org. It's an org website. It's not a gov website. Another piece of evidence that this is not a government program. Okay, but we are in supporting the practitioners in doing this. Okay, and I think we're probably ready for questions. I'm not going to go to the video. I was going to do it, but I will stop here. And I thank you for your time and your diligence, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, take comments.